When you picture the British Empire, you probably see a world map with a whole lot of it painted red. But what if we look at it a different way? Not as just a collection of territories, but as one giant, intricate machine. A global machine where every colony, every trade route was a perfectly designed gear or piston. Today, we're going to pop the hood on that machine and see exactly how it was built, piece by piece, to fuel the revolution and literally reshape the world. We've all heard this phrase, right? And it does a perfect job of capturing the sheer scale of it all. An empire so vast it touched every continent. A network so complete that somewhere, at any given moment, the sun was shining on British soil. It's an incredible image of power.
But here's the thing. An empire on that scale doesn't just happen. You don't get there by accident. It wasn't about just planting flags. It was a massive feat of engineering. So that brings us to the big question. How was this global machine actually built? What was the blueprint?
And this is the absolute core of it. This new wave of expansion wasn't about glory or conquest for its own sake. Nope. It was driven by this new economic engine that was roaring to life back home in Britain. The factories weren't just asking for it, they were demanding it. So let's start with that engine. Because the Industrial Revolution created this kind of relentless, insatiable hunger, a constant pressure that could only be satisfied by reaching out across the entire planet. Okay, so this is the engine in action. Think of it like a giant, powerful heart, constantly pumping. On one side, it's pulling in raw materials. British factories had this bottomless appetite for stuff like cotton from India, rubber from Malaya, minerals and tin from Africa. But on the other side, that same heart was pumping out a tidal wave of finished goods, textiles, steel, heavy machinery that absolutely had to find new markets to be sold in. It was this perfect loop: extract, produce, sell, repeat. And the whole point of the empire was to make sure that loop never ever stopped. All right, so if you need a constant flow of stuff coming in and products going out, you've got to have secure supply lines. This is all about how Britain didn't just control territories, but how they engineered a whole global network of trade routes. And right at the center of this entire Asian network was India. It is impossible to overstate how important India was. It wasn't just another colony. There's a reason they called it the jewel in the crown. Sure, it was a massive source of resources and a huge market in itself, but even more than that, it was a strategic launchpad. It was the command center from which Britain could project all of its power eastward, into Southeast Asia and all the way to China. And from that Indian hub, Britain started forging this chain of strategic outposts across Southeast Asia, taking over Burma, controlling Malaya, setting up Singapore. None of this was random. Each move was a carefully chosen link in a chain designed to lock down the vital sea lanes connecting the Indian Ocean to the Pacific. And Singapore? Well, Singapore was the linchpin holding it all together. Its location was just perfect, right at the tip of the Malay Peninsula. It became this critical intersection, like a massive highway interchange for all the trade routes connecting India, China, and the Spice Islands. It just supercharged the entire imperial machine. Then comes 1869, a single year, a single engineering marvel that would completely rewire global trade and make this machine we're talking about faster and more powerful than ever before. That was the year the Suez Canal opened. It literally sliced right through Egypt, creating a direct waterway between Europe and Asia. Suddenly, that grueling months-long journey around the tip of Africa was just gone, obsolete. This new highway to India cut travel time by weeks. And for Britain, the takeaway was immediate and crystal clear. Controlling the Suez Canal wasn't just a good idea, it was an absolute strategic necessity. The whole machine depended on it. Now, China was a totally different kind of problem. See, Britain was buying enormous amounts of Chinese tea and silk, but China didn't really want British goods in return. This created a huge trade deficit for Britain. So what was their solution? To force a product on the Chinese market, opium, grown in British India. When China, understandably, tried to stop this, it led to the Opium Wars, a conflict designed not to conquer China, but to use military force to pry open its massive market. So you've got all these wildly different territories all over the globe. How on earth do you actually manage it all? Well, Britain developed a kind of toolkit for control, and they'd pick the right tool for the right job. And that toolkit basically had two main options. First, you had direct rule. That's boots on the ground, British officials running the show, imposing British laws. But way more common, especially in bigger, more complex places, was indirect rule. This is where Britain would find existing local leaders, princes, chiefs, emirs, and basically rule through them. It was a really pragmatic choice. It was cheaper, you needed fewer British officials, and it often kept things from boiling over right away. The downside, it often propped up certain groups over others, planting the seeds for a lot of future conflict. But let's be really clear about something. Whether the rule was direct or indirect, whether the local leader was cooperative or not, underneath it all, the entire system was backed up by one thing: the overwhelming power of the Royal Navy and the British military. That was the ultimate guarantee. It protected the trade routes and was always there to enforce British authority if it was ever challenged.
So you've got the territories and you've got the methods of control. The final piece of the puzzle was connecting it all, literally wiring this global network together with technology and pushing expansion off the coasts and deep into the continents.
And Africa is the perfect example of this shift. For most of the 19th century, Britain was pretty content with just having trading posts along the coast. But as that industrial machine got hungrier and hungrier for new resources, things like rubber, diamonds, copper, which were all found deep inland, that coastal strategy just wasn't going to cut it anymore. And that's what sparked the scramble for Africa. It was this frantic, competitive rush to claim territory and lock down those resources before any other European power could. And it was technology that made managing this huge inland empire even possible. You can think of it as a three-step system. First, the telegraph. It was like the empire's nervous system, connecting London to its colonial governors in near real time. Second, railways. These were the arteries, built specifically to haul resources out of the deep interior to the coastal ports. And third, the new steamships, which acted as the global circulatory system, moving all those goods more reliably and efficiently than ever before. It was a fully integrated, high-tech system for its time.
So this brings us to the big finish, the legacy. What was the ultimate impact of building this incredible, powerful, and profitable global machine?
Well, the legacy of this machine is profoundly two-sided, no doubt about it. For Britain, it generated staggering amounts of wealth and cemented its position as the world's superpower. But for the colonized regions, it meant their economies and societies were totally re-engineered to serve British interests. Local industries often got crushed, political freedom was gone, and it's absolutely no surprise that this led directly to the rise of powerful resistance and nationalist movements who were determined to break the machine's control.
So we come all the way back to where we started, with this famous quote.
And from Britain's perspective, it was a statement of fact. It was a symbol of a global machine that was humming along with incredible power and efficiency, a system that connected the entire world for its own benefit. But the real question, the one I want to leave you with, is this. We've seen how the machine was built. We understand the cold, hard logic that drove it. But for the millions of people whose lands and lives were turned into cogs in that machine, what did it feel like when the sun finally went down on their own independence? That's the other side of the story, isn't it?